So next we're going to go with Pat Geiger, who now works at the National Death Penalty.
Death penalty information.
That's exactly what it is. Pat and I also had many GIS classes together, I believe taught by that man right there, Richard Hinton, who deserves some claps. Let's clap for him. All right. So Pat, for his thesis, wrote a paper about homelessness camp cleanups that got posted in the Washington Post, and this is him talking about it. This is his map. Is this perfect as it is?
Yeah.
Great. I'm going to stop talking and let him talk about it.
Thank you, Max. So my presentation will be visually less exciting, and I also don't work at a think tank. But I did recently complete my master's thesis, and it was on a subject of local interest, so thanks to Max for inviting me to come talk about it. And it is related to policy, and a policy that's been followed in DC as well as in cities across the country, specifically clearing homeless encampments in public spaces, so on sidewalks, in parks. And I was kind of interested in the geography of that in DC. Where is it happening, and what the impacts of it are. So the first thing I had to do was gather data, and I couldn't really do that by just walking around and finding each encampment, because they're all over the place, right? I couldn't do that by myself, so myself and some news reporters had to FOIA the DC government, because they also didn't want to give me data, but they have now made public everywhere where they have conducted an encampment cleanup over the past 4 years, because this started in 2015. It was implemented by Mayor Bowser in response to a large encampment in the Watergate area, right across the street. And what I found was that this is not something that happens randomly. These encampments are clustered in specific parts of the city. You can see up here, there's obviously a lot near Union Station in Noma, as well as in Foggy Bottom, Georgetown, but almost all of them are in downtown. And what I found was that's obviously very strategic, pretty self-explanatory. If you need to live outside, you need to be close to important resources like public bathrooms, food providers, etc. And then I also found, based on DC's data, that the encampment cleanups are happening more and more frequently. There were exactly 100 cleanups conducted in 2018, and that's not at 100 different campsites. So not only are the campsites themselves clustered, but where the cleanups occur also tend to cluster. So the colors aren't showing up real well here, but 40 of the 100 encampment cleanups alone happened in Noma, and that opened up sort of a slew of other research questions. Why are these cleanups happening so frequently in Noma as opposed to, say, Foggy Bottom, where there were only 16 encampment cleanups, even though anybody who works in Foggy Bottom or goes to GW can tell you that the encampments are there every day, just like they are in Noma. That led to some interesting conclusions about kind of the role that sort of public-private partnerships and businesses are playing in the governance of public space in DC. The NOMA bid works in coordination with the Department of Transportation and the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services to conduct these cleanups. And Noma is obviously a rapidly changing neighborhood, and so you see that kind of the politics of public space are intricately connected to how DC handles homelessness. It should go without without needing to be said that these cleanups don't do anything to end homelessness. According to the latest point-in-time count, which is a dramatic underestimate of the homeless population, there were 6,500 people experiencing homelessness in DC, so that's almost one in every 1,000. My research basically concluded that encampments are strategically located and the city is attempting to move people from these strategic locations. And that has that raises some pretty serious concerns about how and why we're implementing policy relating to homelessness in DC. Yeah, that's it. Woo.
And for those of us less familiar with this topic, can you define a homeless encampment? Like what specifically? Is it like a tent in a street, and then you're pushing that person who lives in that tent in the street elsewhere? Can you define textbook style? What specifically defines encampment?
Yeah, so the city defines it as any temporary abode. It doesn't have to be a tent, but it's any kind of semi-permanent structure that you set up for the purpose of sleeping in. Yeah, just sleeping in, because you can store your stuff in public space in DC, actually, legally, without having it removed. But, so when an encampment cleanup happens, signs are posted, and people living there are given 2 weeks notice, saying that, like, okay, on Thursday at 10 a.m., the Office of the Deputy Mayor is going to conduct a cleanup. So what happens is, if you get there Thursday at 9 a.m., everybody's already gone, and then if you come back Thursday at 1 p.m., everybody's back. So the cleanups are really ineffective at, obviously they're ineffective at like providing people experiencing homelessness with services, but they're also ineffective at keeping public spaces clean. Good question. Yeah.
Would encampment also involve bus stops, such as overhead bus stops?
Like if you were sleeping under a bus stop?
Not sleeping, but if you took your stuff and stored it at a bus stop in the city, that makes it overhead. Would that also count as an encampment?
It would depend on if you're sleeping there. There's not a hard definition. The city literally just says any temporary abode, so there's not a strict idea of what it is.
Okay, follow-up question would be, when you look at locations, did you check to see how close they were to a metro station, like proximity?
I didn't run like a calculation on that. I ran calculations closest to public bathrooms and service providers, but most of them are very close to metro stations. So I don't have a number to give you, but yeah.
So I think, I'm sorry, I know we have questions, but we have 4 presenters, and he's awesome, so talk to him after.